Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our Global Outlook segment is sponsored by Maury's monthly newsletter, Global Outlook. If you'd like a free copy, just go to our website, theworldreport.org. Iranian warships enter the Atlantic for the first time in history, while sanctions on the Islamic Republic continue to be eased. Russia warns that Ukraine is out of control as Russian police gun down a jihadist leader who threatened the Olympic Games. Benjamin Netanyahu warns he's going to teach Hamas a lesson after 13,000 Hamas youths graduate suicide bombing school. Maury, what do you make of what's going on with the Ukraine and Russia, the Olympic Games? I mean, this is a very, very tense time for the Russians.
Much so. You see,
and they have a security apparatus that they're putting out 150 miles from the Olympic Games.
It doesn't make any difference. If somebody wants to blow themselves up, they'll find a way to do it. Now, you see, you're getting back to a very important change that's taken place in the last 20, 30 years, and that is when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, all the power was in Moscow, and they were just a province. And
housing a natural gas pipeline to Europe.
Yeah, right. Well, the pipeline still comes out of Russia, not the.
But it goes through the Ukraine to
right,
get
no,
to
but
Eastern
my point was that the Ukraine is now an independent country, half of which is geared to Europe. It's Western. It's even from the religious standpoint, they're primarily Roman Catholics, and the eastern part are more Greek Orthodox. Russian Orthodox, which is the other part.
And they bow to Moscow.
They bow to Moscow, exactly. And you have a president now in Kiev, the capital, who will not go along with becoming part of the European community, the European Union. And this is causing a very big rift in the Ukraine, and you're almost on the verge of civil war in the Ukraine because the eastern part, which is geared toward Russia, is against the western part, which was more toward the Eastern European, the Polish part. And the religion plays a part there because they're of different religions. So Ukraine looks like it's starting to break up.
And they've got their own Islamist problem in Russia as well. That we're starting to see with the
that comes out of
Dagestan.
Dagestan, which is in Chechnya, which is part of Russia. It was not one of the provinces or one of the countries that they become independent. And you're right. I mean, when you mention the Black Widows, you're talking about wives of extremists and of jihadists that were killed by the Russians. You know, the Russians aren't very pleasant when they catch one of these guys. They kill them. I mean, right on the spot. So there's some very vicious feelings there between the jihadists and the Russian secret police. And I think this is going to get worse, and they're now, as you say, they're hunting down these widows.
And you look at the Sarnov brothers that were responsible for the Boston Marathon bombing. They were straight out of Chechnya, I think it was, in Russia, the extremist element of Russia.
Yes.
So they've got a lot of problems.
Which was always Islamic. That was the Islamic part of Russia. That was, by the way, that was not made part of Russia until the middle of the 19th century. So, you know, that's, without getting into detail on this, I think Gorbachev, from the standpoint of the Soviet Union, made a horrible mistake in getting, in really making Russia half the size from the standpoint of population. You know, he gave up White Russia, which was part of Europe. Russia has actually become more of an Asian country than it has a Eurasian country. And also, of course, the satellites where they were in power going all the way to East Germany were all part of the Soviet Union in a way. So they have now truncated into a much smaller area, but they found that these areas are now they're being antagonistic toward Mother Russia.
And now we look towards the Middle East. Just like we've predicted for years, we've been together for a lot of years doing this show on radio and television.
Right.
And we have been forecasting, as soon as we leave Iraq, Iran takes over, Fallujah falls, the Islamists get back in, and Iraq becomes a complete nightmare mess. And we're seeing that play out
worse than ever.
Now.
I think the Arab Middle East and the Arab North Africa. You know, all the northern tier of Africa that's north of the Sahara is all Islamic.
Morocco, Ethiopia.
Morocco being the further west, Tunisia, Algeria. And the thing that is horrifying and could have been foretold, because you have the real problem in the Middle East was never Israel. The problem was always the Sunnis and the Shiites. The Shiites being more the radical part, and the Sunnis more the more orthodox. And consequently, now there is a war going on throughout Arabia to see who's going to come out ahead. Iran has become the powerhouse for the Shias, and they have, and because Iraq is primarily Shia, it's about 45% Shia, it's about 25 or 30% Sunni, and about 20% Kurds. So, but they're falling apart. They're going back to their tribal ways.
And you really don't have a Sunni opposition other than you've got Saudi Arabia, but they're going to have to gear up very, very quickly if they're going to catch Iran.
No. Well, do you know what? Saudi Arabia is secretly working with Israel. They're not going to admit it. You know, the Prince Al-Walid, the multi-billionaire from Saudi Arabia, made the statement. He said, I would have never lived to see the fact that Saudi Arabia
partnered with the Jews?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he said. And he said, that's, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, you know what to me is the most ridiculous thing I'm seeing? This so-called peace conference between Israel and the West Bank, the Palestinians. They took that name because the Romans and the Turks all used it. These are people that came from all around.
Egypt.
You know why they became populist? They became populist because when the Jews took over, going back to the early 1900s, when they came from Russia and they came from Eastern Europe primarily, and then of course when Hitler came in, the lucky ones got out and went to Palestine. And they started factories, they started businesses. So a lot of the Arabs that couldn't make it go in the neighboring countries went to the Jewish part, and now they want to have their own country. Now, can you, in the widest reaches of your imagination, ever think that Netanyahu or anybody else would give up 1 inch of strategic military depth and putting a bunch of jihadists right next door to Tel Aviv? I don't think so. That's why this whole thing is absurd and it's a joke. Every president in this country, including Bush, and even going back, the guy that came closest, fortunately, Arafat wouldn't accept the deal, was Clinton. They were going, and the guy.
And let me just jump in, because Arafat had everything that they say that they wanted,
yes,
and still rejected the deal, which tells you there's no possible way
the only thing
they could
is,
have peace.
He demanded that the refugees who are all over the Middle East that came out of the original Palestine should be allowed to come back. That would have killed off the country anyway.
I think one of the most disturbing things to me is Iran's buildup of their navy. They're set to control every shipping cargo route in the Middle East, and now they're coming into the Atlantic with their warships for the first time in history. Does that concern you a little bit?
No, it does not. For a simple reason. Go back to the war between Iran and Iraq. Iran should have squelched Iraq in that war. When you consider Iraq has about 24, 25 million people, Iran has about 80 million, and Iran lost 1 million, and I think the Iraqis lost 500,000. That war lasted about 8 years. You know, Henry Kissinger said it's too bad it didn't last like the 30-year war in Europe. You know, we would.
But they didn't have nuclear weapons, and they didn't have a navy like they have today.
No, but here I have talked to some Iranian people in the one guy who was an Air Force general who was one of the founders of the Iranian Air Force. He says they're a joke. They've got some old MiGs that they can hardly fly. He says Iran is posturing and bluffing. Now, granted, nobody wants to call a bluff because there might be some iron fist behind that bluff. But he says the Iranians could not wage war if they tried. They're not capable of it. They're good at killing each other or blowing themselves up.
Well, when you have a nuclear warhead, you don't have to be very good.
No, well then, you know.
And they're getting close, I believe.
Worse than that, if you believe that blowing yourself up and going to heaven with 72 virgins, if you really believe that, you're happy to die. That's the one thing that would worry me, is the fact that they would be willing to do something crazy, which of course would annihilate them, but in the meantime they would annihilate a lot of other good people at the same time.
Interesting you bring that up, because Hamas has just graduated 13,000 of its youth through a suicide bombing academy. So these are people that are training and actually looking forward to blowing themselves up and being a martyr for Allah.
Who just recently died, made a huge mistake when he pulled the Jewish settlers out of Gaza, who were actually a buffer between the main part of Israel and the crazy Hamas people. You know, Hamas got rid of even the more moderate, if you want to call them that, people of the West Bank. And for Israel to even, I think they're negotiating because they want to look like they're doing something, instead of saying, are you crazy? We're not going to give those guys an inch. Then Israel is at fault, and all these liberals in this country are going to say Israel is the one. We've got to pull away from Israel.
And thank God that the Egyptians, the military, came in and got rid of the Muslim Brotherhood, because that was a potential huge problem right next to Israel.
Oh, you bring up a very good point. I think the three countries that are going to work together would be Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And you know another country that's going through a major change right now?
Turkey?
Yes, sir. Erdogan is found out to be a crook, corrupt, and there is
and their currency is crashing right now.
Oh,
too.
yeah, and I guess the Republican, trouble with Turkey, they were going secular because they were following the road of Kemal Ataturk. People don't talk about the father of the country, Kemal Ataturk, anymore. But if they ever unite the opposition enough, the people that are supporting Erdogan are the lowest classes that are in Anatolia. It's a province in Turkey which was very populous, and they have the right to vote just like everybody else. Well, those people are the Islamists. But the military has gone in a hiding pretty much. You know, it used to be the military controlled Turkey. Now, in the last 10 years, they've kind of gone on the sideline, but they can come back just like they did in Egypt.
You know, I wish we had more time, because the global outlook, what's going on in the world, we could just talk for hours and hours and hours about what's happening.
There's a lot of things happening.
Unfortunately, we need to take a short commercial break. Our political insider and moment in history are coming up. Again, if you missed any segments, or if you'd like to see another segment or see the show, just go to our website, theworldreport.org. You can view the entire show or just a couple of segments. Make sure you like us and recommend us. Our quote of the day: politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. Groucho Marx. We'll be right back.